Welcome to the Station Podcast with Rachel Bowman and Michelle Wheelis. We're so excited to be back here with you in 2025. Welcome back.
Yeah, super stoked.
Yeah. Take a look at our new look. We obviously got a new sign and we're in a new space here. Mm-hmm. And we're doing some new things this year in 2025 at the station. We've been praying into what does this look like as we move forward with mentorship in a young generation. And the podcast is part of our mentorship, right? And so we have this whole new look, so that's new. And we have a bunch of new things that are coming around the corner.
Yeah, but we're thinking about talking about dating soon, so that's a fun thing to look forward to.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, that's always a hot topic, dating for young adults and youth. So that will be coming. So Michelle and I, over the last couple months, there's been great things that have happened. There's been some hard things. Michelle, what just happened a couple weeks ago with you?
Well, so I ride a motorcycle, and I actually got into an accident 3 weeks ago. A van pulled out in front of me and I didn't have time to stop. So, very traumatic life event. But definitely seeing God in it and definitely feel like I'm in God's hands. I know that that's kind of a cliche thing to say, but I feel fully surrounded. And there've been even little things like getting disability way before I thought I would and all of that. So I think things have just been working out in my favor, just with all the little pieces that need to come together. Yeah. So I'm in my process of physically healing and then emotionally healing and all of that. So it'll be a process, but I feel like I'm on track for it.
Yeah. I was sitting at a coffee shop and I got a call from Michelle and I knew something was wrong. And you told me you got in this accident and I'm like, okay, I'm coming. Yeah. I just was drop everything and get there. And she's in the ambulance and I'm just like, oh no, what's happening?
Yeah. Rachel's been my emergency contact since I moved to Santa Barbara. So they're like, is there anyone you can call? And I was like, yes. And so I could hear her on the other end. She's like, Michelle. And I'm like, hey.
I know. My heart stopped. So it's so great because Michelle, you're smiling today. Yeah. You're not in as much pain, just a little bit. Yeah. It has been cool to see God answer prayers, and we know that God's going to provide all you need, even for all the medical bills. We're praying for that provision right now for you. Yeah. And so sometimes, you guys, we start the new year really excited we're going to have a new vision and we're going to go after all these things, these goals, and, people write their New Year's resolutions, which for me, I don't even like New Year's resolutions. I like to just ask God, what season am I in and what are we going to do in this season? And what's attainable, what's sustainable, what's actually what am I able to do with you, Lord? And again, connecting to all things are possible with God. Yeah. And so I know for a lot of you out there, you may be thinking, what are the things that I'm going after in this new year? And at the station, we want to dive into more topics with this podcast that the young generation is dealing with and get even more real and more honest with what we're going to talk about. We're going to be bringing guest speakers in at times to be a part of the podcast with us. And we're going to cover, like Michelle said, dating is one of those topics. But we're also going to talk about, there's something in a common theme that I hear when I'm in my mentorship meetings with people is people feel really stuck in life. And how do they get unstuck? How do they carry a vision that they have for their lives? Even practically, I think that's something we want to do is get even more practical with you guys, giving you practical tools through this podcast. And I just know too that people really want more boldness and confidence. Yeah. Anxiety has just been running rampant, right? And we did talk about that this last year in some of our episodes, just touched on anxiety. But we actually want to flip it and not talk about anxiety. We want to talk about how do you gain confidence and boldness. And so there's a lot of new wonderful things that are going to be coming down the pipeline through this podcast this year with a lot of wonderful people that will be joining us. And we're excited that you're back, you're listening or watching today. And we're going to dive in today to living life in community. And why is this important? This is so important because honestly, coming out of COVID, we saw people not be able to gain community in their lives. And it's sad to me. And it honestly breaks my heart when I sit down with a young person and they say, I have no community in my life. I feel very lonely. And I personally was in a place like that when I was in college, and that's way before COVID in the 90s. But I was. And so it's not just COVID that created that. COVID just, I think, accentuated it because people got into rhythms, unhealthy rhythms in their life where they got used to being alone. But then they, at some point, realize, wait a second, I am alone and I need some friends. I need some people in my life. And so we're going to dive into this today. Why is living life in community important? And there's a scripture that I want to read to start off. Hebrews 10, verses 24 and 25. It talks about community and how important it is in the Bible. And it says, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. And I love this verse because I just really believe that God's heart for us is to meet together, to be in community, to not to get in a habit, it says, of being basically by ourselves and not in community. God is about us coming together, obviously, right? He wants us to love one another. It says that in so many scriptures. How do you love people if you're not with them? You know, it's pretty basic there. And so we have some examples too in the Bible, which is so amazing because we see Jesus, like he doesn't just do this on his own. He gets these 12 disciples in community with him. And he gets to, yes, teach them, but he also gets to be with them and just cultivate, you know, life on earth with these people. And we also see in the Bible, in the book of Titus, it talks about, I think it's chapter 2, yes, where we see people in community, the older and the younger generation together. And so that's like part of community. We'll get into more of like our parts of community in a little bit, but we also see in the Bible marriage and family. Marriage and family is part of our community. And then we see friendship. Like Jonathan and David in the Bible are an incredible example of just friendship and how important that is in our life. And so I just know, like, for me and my heart, like through the station when we're doing mentorship, is connecting people to the importance of community, but also connecting them to practically how do they go after community. And so we're going to talk about this today because it is important. My heart breaks for people when they're lonely. I know how it was for me in college and that lonely feeling. It was like I was desperately lonely in certain years during my college years. And I just never want to see anybody lonely like that. And I'm sure you have felt that way too, right, Michelle?
Yeah, I think I talk a lot about this just because it's my most recent experience. But when I moved to Santa Barbara, I was not okay emotionally and I was very lonely. And I think that was the biggest thing was like I hadn't cultivated community yet. And so it takes time. Yeah. Like, I think it like, I don't want to like jump ahead or anything, but I think it just takes time and it takes vulnerability. And I was praying like through what I wanted to say for this episode, and I felt like God was saying community is essential for growth. Yeah, 100%. Because, you know, iron sharpens iron, and you like when you cultivate your community, you're surrounding yourself with people who inspire you and challenge you and keep you accountable, and even put people who bring comfort and hope. And I think it's important to realize that like you can acknowledge that you need community, but that doesn't mean that you're automatically just going to get community.
Right.
And it takes being vulnerable and taking the risk of being like, okay, not only am I going to put myself out there and hope that these people accept me into their community, or we create this community, but needing to understand that community also means that you might be challenged.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
that you are going to like,
true.
I feel like sometimes people think, oh, this is like my best friend. And then you realize they don't have any like arguments or like disagreements. And it's like, okay, well, are you growing then?
Yeah. Or are you being authentic?
Are you being authentic? Yeah. And so I think people almost don't see community as like something for growth. It's almost like, oh, this is where I need to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
Or like, this is where I feel like, oh, people like me. It's like, are you surrounding yourself with people who inspire you to grow, to like do these things that you have a heart for?
Yeah. I love that so much.
And like, it is like, you have to deal with the discomfort of being in relationship with people. Yeah. Like one of the verses I wanted to share on was talking about, it's Ephesians 4. It says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as Christ forgave you. Like you're going to have relationships where you're going to have to forgive each other. Yeah. Like we're all human. We all mess up and like, but we also all like, we're supposed to sharpen each other and challenge each other and keep each other accountable. Yeah. And I think that's a major part of community that people aren't focusing on. I think they just want I want to hang out with my friends instead of the like, how are we going to build each other up? Yeah. And like point each other towards Christ.
Yeah. This is so good, Michelle. I really love this. And I mean, the Bible talks about it. Like we're here to build up the body of Christ. Like we're here, yes, to speak life and of course to love. I mean, that's one of God's greatest commandments is love him and then love others. But part of loving is iron sharpens iron, challenging. And
I will say, I think this doesn't mean go out and be vulnerable with every single person you meet.
Sure. Yeah.
So I
this
think
is important. You could talk about that.
Yeah. For sure. Jesus had the 12 disciples.
Yeah.
And I just love this passage because it just breaks it down a little bit better. But Matthew 26:36 talks about when Jesus goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. I always say it wrong.
I know, it's hard to say it.
Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him, James and John, I think. And he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. And I think I just read that today and I was like, that's important.
Yeah.
He didn't bring all 12 with him. Right. He didn't express to all 12 that he was going through this deep sorrow. Sure. He trusted these specific 3 to see him in that state. And I think we talked about circles, like your inner circle in one of the podcasts in our last season.
Like healthy
boundaries. Circles, and like knowing like, oh, maybe these people in my community aren't the ones who are in my inner circle who get to see me in this state. Like you have the certain people that you trust with certain things. And then sometimes there is a community for, oh, like this is a person I go to for fun, or like, this is not necessarily somebody who's going to be speaking into my life. Sure. But maybe I'm the one who's supposed to be pouring into this person and not necessarily sharing my like all my sorrows and things with. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Oh, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you've said about this, Michelle, because, and again, we did talk about it in another episode in 2024 about healthy boundaries, but I think that there's this wisdom to carry when we start to cultivate community in our life. And so it's not just like, I want to speak this because I think it's so cute. You know how little kids, they'll just be on a playground and they don't even know the person. And they're just like, they're my friend because they went on a swing or a slide together. And there's this maturing in us as humans. As we grow up, we realize, unfortunately, not everybody is our friend, but we still can love everyone, right? There's a difference. And so I just wanted to speak to that. What I see is there's this circle of life. I like to call it circle of life. And I know that statement is used in a different aspect that I'm talking about. I'm talking about our personal circle of life. Like we can look at a circle or even you can think of it as a table that's a circle shape. And there's these different seats at the table in relationships, like of relationships that you have. So you have, when you're little, your seats at your table might be pretty little because you've got a mom and a dad and maybe a brother and a sister or a few siblings, and then a couple little friends at school. And you have a teacher, at school. But then as we grow up, our circle gets bigger, the seats at the table get bigger. And Jesus had 12 at his table when you talk about the disciples. But then it talks about in the Bible, he had other seats at his table too, because he had like Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And for us, when we think of our circle of life, we think of this table, there's a different seat for our tribe. And I feel like kind of what you were just describing is the people within your circle that you can trust, that are your go-to, even with the deepest stuff, like the deepest hurts, that you could talk to almost about anything. And that's your tribe. That's the spaces at your table that you could call your tribe. And then you may have others like that are housemates, and some of them might be a part of the inner circle, like Jesus had, James and John and Peter. But some of those housemates that you live with might not be part of that inner circle, where they don't get to hear the deepest hurts and everything going on in your life emotionally, or there may be things that you share with them and then you have to discern and you have to gain some wisdom in that. Family also has a seat at the table. For some of us, I know for me, like growing up, like my family was at the table and probably the most prevalent, the people that I would go to the most. But then as time went on, sometimes families get broken. And so those people in your family, they're at your table, but they're not the ones that you go to for everything. Even sometimes you can't go, unfortunately, to a mom or dad for wisdom if they're not in a healthy place themselves. Another seat at the table is the older generation, like I was speaking to out of Titus, putting mentors in your life, because older people than you have lived more life than you. And if they're walking with Jesus, then they're gaining more wisdom over time from the Lord, hopefully. And so this seat at the table mentorship, people that you just put in your life that would disciple you, would come alongside you and give you wisdom. Another seat at your circle would be church community. And I know not everyone that maybe listens to this knows Jesus as their Lord, as their Savior. Maybe they don't go to church, but I would just challenge you, like a great space to build community is a church, a good, healthy church. And if you are a Christian, oh my goodness, like just the scripture I said in Hebrews 10 talks about not making a habit of not meeting with people that love Jesus. And so church is an incredible seat at your circle of life, in your circle of life. Work community, your coworkers, that's another space in your life that can become community. We all have hobbies. Like Michelle mentioned, she loves riding motorcycles. Yeah. She will get back on the motorcycle when she's healed up. Yeah. I love skiing. I love cross-country skiing. I love running. People love art, music. There's hobbies in our lives. And so we can also, a seat at our table can be people that love that hobby too. And you hang out with those people, joining a club that does this hobby. Obviously, another seat at the table is the person you marry. You got to start with the dating. So at some point in your life, there's no formula for when exactly, but at some point in your life, well, when you're old enough, you have a seat of a husband or a wife. So that's another part of community. And then last, I love challenging people to serve on a team, be a part of a team that serves God. Yeah. And putting that in the space. So we have these spots in our circle of life where we can fill those spots with community. So I think it's really good for each of us to stop at some time in our life, pause, and think about where in our circle of life, are our seats missing people in our, like, where are we missing community in these spots in our life? Because I believe God's about fullness and wholeness in our lives. And so filling each spot is important. And so, you were going to share kind of where you recognize missing some spots in community, or seeing spots, actually. So seeing spots, sorry.
I have this habit. I just like being funny and laughing at things. And so after the accident, which I realized I didn't say what happened, but I broke my wrist in the accident. So I was in the hospital for 2 nights. But I posted a few things on my Instagram story just because I was wanting to be silly.
Yeah, I saw them.
Like, kind of like let people know that something happened.
She has humor in the middle of pain.
But trying to be funny. And like the amount of people that wrote to me and were like, if you need anything, let me know, was like overwhelming. Yeah. Like even knowing like in the moment of like, I need to call Rachel because I know that Rachel can call all of these other people and let them know. I know I need to have her call this person to move my bike. Like, and so like there were so many aspects of like people stepping up to like help. And like even Galatians 6 talks about carrying each other's burdens. And I fully felt that even in just people reaching out and being like, if you need anything, let me know. But yeah, it was crazy. Like people from my Bible study community, people from the motorcycle community, people from church, people from work, like so many people were offering to help. And like, it's like, I don't know. It's just funny. Like this is a whole, like this side topic, but like just realizing like how many people care about you and like what you bring to a community too. And like, just like your place in community and people being able to recognize that and then reach out to carry your burdens. So I thought that was for sure really cool to experience. Not great circumstances, but like having that realization of like, oh, I moved here 1.5 years ago and look how big my community is now. And
it was really cool to see that, Michelle. And I think, I want to speak to this. It's not even in our notes, but I feel like God's kind of leading me to say this. Sometimes we sit there and we say, woe is me. I have no friends. I have no community. But I believe that can be a lie sometimes because it's how we see ourselves. But it isn't how others see us or how God sees us, right? There actually is people in your life, you may not believe it right now or see it right now, that love you. And when something like a tragedy happens, they'll come out of the woodworks. So don't discount yourself, because you may have already really spoken into others' lives more than you think you have, just by being who you are. And that's what I really want to encourage people in that, because I think like you may feel lonely, but I wouldn't be surprised and about like if you took the risk. And we're going to get into practical ways of building community now, but because it is a risk. It takes risk to put yourself out there. It takes risk to call somebody up. It takes risk to let someone know that you're lonely. It does. That's a vulnerable place to be like, hey, I'm not doing well. I really could use some friends. I really could use some community in my life. Will you go to coffee with me? So do you want to let's go down the list of some practical ways of building community into your life, filling those spaces in your circle.
I think the easiest one, if we're being honest, was work, just because you're with those people so often. And really I think realizing oh, this coworker is somebody that I get along with well, and then taking the risk, be like, hey, do you want to have a movie night or something like that? And asking, because I think sometimes people do get scared, and so maybe that person wants to hang out with you but doesn't want to risk it, kind of thing. So asking to hang out, even going to church weekly was definitely a big one. Our church is very big on all right, now say hi to someone next to you after they do worship. And so getting to chat with people you don't necessarily know yet, or to see the people that are your friends but you only see on Sundays, kind of thing. But yeah, so seeing people at church or even going to church events is important. They started a young adult thing at our church recently. So
it's called Y'all.
Nice. Yeah. So like taking a chance and going to something like that, even if you may not know people there.
Sure.
I think that's a big thing too, is the social anxiety aspect.
I know.
Showing up somewhere where you might not know people.
Right.
I'd encourage you, even in those moments, like if you know you have a safe person, take them with you. Mm-hmm. Because then like or like find the dog at the party, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
like obviously like you're not going to be talking to a dog the entire time, but like find somebody that makes you feel safe and ask them if they'll go with you.
Yeah.
And then you have someone with you, and then you can interact from that safe space.
Yeah.
I do think it is important to take the risk, but 100%. If you know you're not going to go, take a safe person with you. Yeah. That's totally okay.
Yeah. I was thinking about people in school too, because some of our listeners are still in school, whether it's like high school or college. Mm-hmm. And I know sometimes, especially like at UCSB, we're in Santa Barbara, so that's huge campus, but you're in these classrooms, not some are virtual, but you're in these classrooms, some of you in person, and it's taking the risk to talk to the person sitting next to you before class starts or after class starts, and just chatting and being like, hey, what'd you think about that assignment? Or coming up with, this is practical, coming up with some statements. Like for those of you that are shy and get more nervous or dealing with social anxiety, you can actually, I know it may sound silly, but I think it's important to practice statements that you would say in introducing yourself to a person, and how you would actually say, hey, would you want to go get a coffee or grab lunch sometime? Or I saw this movie and it was super cool, but I'd see it again. Or I heard it was cool. Let's go see it. Stuff like that. Or I heard this event's happening. Would you want to go with me? Mm-hmm. Practicing statements that you would say, introducing yourself to new people. Yeah.
That's a good one. I think you had mentioned hobbies.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest turning points, I think, for me was the whole motorcycle community that I got to be a part of here.
Yeah.
Showing up, even though they do the whole like, oh, let's talk before and then we'll go on a ride together, which is like stressful. But like when you come together and you're all doing something that you love together, it like bonds you in a way where sometimes you don't even have to talk about it.
Sure.
But I think that's cool too. Like, you're building community, but you're also doing something. And so I think that takes a little bit of the pressure off, because you're not focused on, oh, I have to like make conversation.
Right.
We're just riding together. And like this person's become my friend now because we've ridden together.
Yeah, for sure. Just when you're doing a hobby, some of you might like to exercise. Yeah. Well, there's gyms out there, or there's running clubs, and you can join classes. Pilates is a good one, but you're in a class, and then slowly over time you get used to being there with these people regularly. And then, it takes courage. We talked about that in an episode last year, and courage and overcoming that fear and anxiety to put yourself out there. You can't just sit in your house and scroll and think you're going to create community in your life. Yeah. And if for you too, another practical thing, like let's say you really have social anxiety with just your peers, then reach out to an older person that that you trust, and have that person start to encourage you, like a mentor, and that's a great idea. That's what's so cool about church, is that you can join like a small group. There's pastors at church. There's leaders within the church community that lead like home groups and small groups that you can get to know them, and they can actually help you and introduce you to people. That's another avenue. So these are some practical ideas of building community, filling in the spaces in your circle. Yeah. And Michelle, did you have anything else on your heart?
I did.
Before we
it's just kind of a picture that this was a prophetic word someone actually gave to me. Cool. Before, I think it was right after I graduated from college. It was a while ago.
Sure.
But he was talking about how he saw like the wooden wheel like you'd see on a wagon, and how it's like the round part, and then you have all the like spokes going to the center.
Yeah. Like an old Western wagon wheel.
and he was like talking about how the wheel needs to be balanced. Like one can't be shorter than the other, because then it'll be lopsided and it won't be balanced.
Okay.
And I think just to go along with what you said earlier about like the seats at the table, like having these different aspects of your community and having it be like, it's almost like that creates your balance, like having all these different areas where you have community and where you can pour in and then they can pour into you.
Yes.
I do think that in life creates a lot of balance, because I feel like if you were to just focus on one,
right,
I feel like it, like you might feel solid in that one thing, but there might be this whole other area where like, oh, I don't have mentors speaking into my life. Like I just have this one friend that I hang out with and we watch TikToks sitting next to each other, or like, you know. So like I think
it's
like
reality
having
nowadays.
the different aspects of your communities, in that way it like almost just spreads it out, and I think creates a lot of balance for our lives.
100%. And I think that too, in talking about that balance within our community and filling in all the spaces of our circle brings the wholeness to our lives that God really wants for us. He does. He really wants it for us. And and when you're talking about this balance in community, when you're thinking about filling in the spaces in your circle of life, you also have to think about who fills those spaces, because you don't want people that are just always agreeing with you, like you mentioned before, but you also don't want people that are constantly putting you down either. Like you want people that are also building you up as you're building them up. And so it's this give and take, like healthy community in relationship with people is a person doesn't just take from you, and you don't take from them. It's an ebb and flow in relationship with people. You pour into them, they pour into you, and it goes back and forth. It's not just a one-way relationship, right? I mean, we'll speak to this even in dating eventually too. Yeah. But we just want to today, we want to leave you with, there's always hope. Like this is how the station, one of our hugest vision statements is there's always hope. We're releasing dreams by raising foundations in a young generation. One of the foundations of life is community and learning how to build healthy community in our life. But there's always hope for every person. There is always someone out there that will step into your circle of life with you. It's just you having the courage to get up, step outside your comfort zone, and reach out to someone. Let love lead you. That's what Jesus did. He let love lead him. First to these disciples, those 12, and then to so many others in the Bible. And you can read all about the life of Jesus and how he lived life in community in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The 4 Gospels is a great place to start in the Bible. And just see how Jesus did it, how he just let love lead him. And he just loved people through his words and his actions. And so just start there. Just start there. And we hope you're encouraged today. The station is here as a resource for all of you. That's why we do this. It's truly not for us. It's for all of you. And if you need community and you need encouragement, we're here. You can DM us, you can email us, and we will be here to pray for you, even to connect you to community, to churches in your area. We can be a resource for you. You are not alone. Truly, you are not alone. There's always hope, and we will continue to pray for our listeners consistently. So any last words, Michelle?
No.
Okay. Thank you for joining us for episode 1 of 2025. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for the Station Podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Station Corp, or follow us on Instagram at The Station Corp and at The Station Camp. If you'd like to email us, our email is info@thestationcorp.com.